Hey everybody, David Hughes here with my No Knot, No Hardware tarp suspension. This is just for fun, and I may switch it out later, but I put up a tarp with no knots, no hardware, and no lose your tarp line. This suspension works like a continuous ridge line, but you can see there are two pieces of rope, two ropes for your tarp with a grappler's hitch. Then you come across, here is a prusik on a continuous loop that's been lark's headed to the tarp pullout. Now we walk along here. Here's another prusik that's been lark's headed to the tarp pullout. And then here is something I call tandem prusiks. This prusik is lark's headed onto the longer rope that goes pretty much all the way across. And this prusik is tied or prussiked onto the shorter one that essentially functions like a tree strap. And then they're lark's headed together. Now I'll tell you how I made it. Starting at this end, I spliced. Let me start over.
You're good. Go ahead.
Started at this end. I spliced a longberry loop in the end of the rope. Then onto the longberry loop, I tied a grappler's hitch that starts with a round turn and ends with a double strand, double diamond knot. Then I came down here and I tied a prusik out of a continuous loop. I think this continuous loop is an 8-inch loop. I bought this one. I tied the prusik around the long green rope, the tarp line, the ridge line. Then I did a lark's head around the tarp tie out. The only way to do that was to pull the tarp line through the lark's head. And so it had to be disassembled, and you had to lark's head this on by pulling the tarp line through when you make the lark's head. One on the other end of the tarp. Because you cannot pull the line through because it's already connected at the other end. So the way I did this one was, I took a continuous loop, I think this is an 8-inch loop, and I prussiked it around a shorter rope that was just to be used, it was about shoestring length, and I prussiked the rope around the shoestring. What you do first is you tie a prusik onto a short piece of rope, such as this blue one, like a shoestring. You tie your prusik onto a short piece of rope. Then, after doing that, then you lark's head your prusik and your shoestring onto your tarp guy out. Then you thread or trace or follow through that prusik and shoestring with your tarp guy line. See, this will be the green one, will be the tarp guy line. And then once it's on there, then you transfer it simply by removing the short piece of rope or the shoestring, whatever you used. And so then you have it lark's headed on there. So what you do is you tie your prusik around your shoestring, you lark's head it to the tarp, and then you trace through, you trace the shoestring with your tarp guy line, then you remove the shoestring. No knots and no hardware. Also, it's kind of stuck on your tarp there, so you're not going to lose your tarp ridge line or misplace it somewhere in your pack. Now, then the next thing I did was I took another continuous loop and I prussicked it around the larger or the longer tarp ridge line. Then I prussicked another continuous loop around the short ridge line that functions as a tree strap. Then after they were both prussicked onto their respective ropes, then I lark's headed onto the end of this continuous loop with this one. And when I was doing it, all I had to do was pull the short rope through the lark's head so that it would all come together. Now, how do we use this? No knots and no hardware. Also, it's kind of stuck on your tarp there, so you're not going to lose your tarp ridge line or misplace it somewhere in your pack. Now, then the next thing I did was I took another continuous loop and I prussicked it around the larger or the longer tarp ridge line. Then I prussicked another continuous loop around the short ridge line that functions as a tree strap. Then after they were both prussicked onto their respective ropes, then I lark's headed onto the end of this continuous loop with this one. And when I was doing it, all I had to do was pull the short rope through the lark's head so that it would all come together. Now, how do we use this? We just slide the prussicks. You grab the barrel of your prussick and slide it. And sometimes to get it to slide, you've got to work it backwards a little bit and slide it. It's a little difficult sometimes and it can jam on you. There, I've dropped that down. I can drop this one down too. There. Now how do you do it? You back them up a little bit, and then so I'm going to reset this one. I'm going to set it, or I'm just going to adjust it and then set it, and then I'm going to adjust this one by pulling on the tarp line. The only drawback to the tandem prussiks is they can jam on you if you get them too tight.